Hello and welcome back to Under the Visor, and I hope you can appreciate the lockdown locks, which are desperately in need of a good cut. Anyway, I've been a huge fan of the BikeShed motorcycle club, bar, cafe, barbers and shop for a very long time. It's a great place just to chill out or to take clients to, which I've done on many occasions. And there's a fascinating story behind it. So I spoke with Anthony van Summeren, better known as Dutch to most people, who is the founder and CEO of the BikeShed, to get the whole story. People who know you over the last few years would know you from the BikeShed Club, but we'll come back to that in a second. So
sure.
Before that, you were in the world of TV and media, and our paths almost crossed at one point, but by a gap of about 5 years, but I'll come back to that in a second, when you were at Extreme Sports. But I'll come back to that. So you spent 25 years in media, TV, publishing, and then the BikeShed. So kind of interested here a little bit about kind of what you did before the BikeShed Motorcycle Club, and then how that kind of transformed through the events and then the restaurant.
I mean, yeah, I was in TV and broadcasting for years, and my passion was music, actually. But I always rode a motorcycle, but I had a big passion for music. I worked for MTV for about 10 years, 9 or 10 years, and I ended up being mostly a creative director. I was a producer and then a director and then a creative director, and then I ended up working in Poland for a few years. Helped launch MTV in Poland, and then I got kidnapped by the Extreme Sports Channel, where I was there for three years as their creative director. Partly because I was a biker and a rider and did a lot of off-road stuff, but also because of my time at MTV. And I worked at also Cartoon Network, Bravo TV, worked at sort of a lot of sort of portfolio channel companies, satellite TV companies, like Virgin Media, who kind of own various channels, and they kind of come and go. A big chunk of time at Time Warner looking after Bravo. Sorry, I'm getting this all a bit wrong now. I'm getting it out of order. It's been a really long time of kind of messing around, looking after other people's brands. I did end up in publishing at HarperCollins for a few years, where I was sort of responsible essentially for anything from marketing to the covers teams, to the PR department. So I was essentially looking after other people's brands. That was my job. And I was brought in to try and sort of, on the one hand, take advantage of new media and the way that was operating, but also being a brand guardian and trying to help brands get in touch with their audiences better. And I really enjoyed that. It was great. And when I worked for MTV, that was my thing. It was my target demographic. And when I was working for the Extreme Sports Channel, obviously a lot of it was about motorbikes and freestyle motocross, and I loved that. But then when I left and got into publishing and then advertising, it wasn't really my thing anymore. And I had to be a bit professional and had to think about sort of target markets where I wasn't the target market, especially at Cartoon Network, where I had to sort of get myself in the mindset of a 10-year-old boy, which arguably wasn't that difficult. But essentially, I was always sort of moving away from who I was and marketing on behalf of other people, and therefore getting more professional about it, I guess, in a lot of ways. And I had free time, because as you get more senior in any business, after a while you dictate your terms. And I was working a 4-day week in an advertising agency, mostly looking after airlines, looking after British Airways and Emirates and Etihad. And this whole kind of cafe racer culture thing was happening probably about 2010, 2011. And I was getting newsletters from Bike Exif, when they were just posting cool, funky cafe racers. And I realized all my friends were into bikes and into biking, but we weren't buying the latest sports bikes that were being promoted by the magazines. And my wife, Vicky, bought me a Ducati Sport Classic 1000. I had a KTM Super Duke R, and I'd had a whole bunch of KTMs, and I was about to buy an RC8R. So I was being really hard marketed by our local dealer. KTM Centre up in Hemel Hempstead was hassling me a lot, sent me on test rides, went to Almeria, did a whole bunch of things on that bike, and I was riding like a twat, actually, and moving away from who I was as a person. It's where you end up with this rider personality that maybe thinks they're Valentino Rossi, and then you end up with this human personality that might be a dad or a creative director or into music or something else. And I realized you have these divergent characters, which seems to be a lot of what biking is all about. You get the kind of weekend warrior who, pretends to be something they're not. And when this cafe racer culture came along, it was far more me, because the new bikes still had performance. You could take an older bike, but you could still have Öhlins and Brembos and speed and performance and handling. And I thought that was amazing. I just thought that was fantastic. So when Vicky bought me the Ducati Sport Classic, which is kind of an old school looking bike, but it's got the dual spark 1000cc Ducati motor, a trellis frame with Öhlins and Brembos. It kind of converted me, and I started customizing it because that's what everyone was doing. And Vicky said, well, why don't you blog about it? Because I was creative and I like photography and design and storytelling, and I was a brand marketeer. She said, why don't you just start telling that story? And so I started a blog called Full Tilt. But a lot of people I knew were doing similar things. Obviously, BikeExif was doing its thing, which I thought was great, but I always wanted to know more about the bikes. I always wanted to know who was customizing them and why. I wasn't really that excited about a CB750 with flat side carbs. It's like, well, why? Who built it? What's it for? Do you ride it? Is it an ornament in your front room? What's the story? And I also had friends who were doing similar things. A couple of friends of mine, Tim and Kev, had launched Spirits of the 70s, and they were kind of marketing-y people. Another friend of mine, Adam, had started Untitled Motorcycles, kind of turning these kind of BMWs into kind of urban, kind of Mad Max kind of brat-style machines. And it was a bit of a thing. And I realized that we should all be sharing what we were doing. So I said, well, why don't we combine all our digital storytelling? And so I said, well, let's call it the BikeShed, because it's just a bunch of mates in a shed talking about their bikes, escaping from the world. And then I kind of set this thing up, and I started cribbing from their blogs and creating this kind of shared blog. And they didn't really get involved because I was doing it, and they went, oh yeah, great, carry on. And that was about the time that Facebook happened as well. So once I put BikeShed onto Facebook, it connected me with other communities really quickly. And I realized there were a lot of really interesting bike builders out there who weren't getting any coverage. People like Cafe Racer Dreams and Down and Out Cafe Racers up north, and a whole bunch of sort of underdog builders who weren't as good at marketing and photography as the builders that Chris Hunter was covering on BikeExif. So I started saying to them, oh, well, can I write a story about your bike on Facebook? And then they'd send me rubbish photos. And because I was good at Photoshop, I'd tartan them up. And I'd try and write a bit more soulfully about the bikes and the people behind them. And so we became the underdog blog, which was really nice. And then suddenly we had, I think, about 17,000, 18,000 followers on Facebook, which now seems quite small. But we had an audience, and it was quite global. And I was making friends with people in Australia and South Africa. I got to be good buddies with Mark Hauer when he was involved with the Southsiders, and not the Southsiders, Southern Cafe Racers. Southsiders was the El Solitario lot. And he was doing the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride, so we helped him out with that. So we had a thing going, and that evolved into events because we'd all meet in the pub every Thursday. We'd drink at the Flask usually, or Landseer up in North London. And all my mates were cameramen and directors and people in the media industry, or quite interesting people. And we were sitting around going, well, shall we go to the NEC bike show? And this was like coming to the end of 2011. And they were like, well, what for? It's a bit of crap. All the bikes there are bikes you see in a dealer. It's all a bit boring. The only girls there are paid to be there, and they're in Lycra, and it's all a bit sticky and sweaty and horrible. And the food's horrible, and our wives and girlfriends aren't going to go because it's rubbish, nowhere to sit, and you can't even get a good coffee. And we started sort of saying, well, what if BikeShed did a show? What if we invited all of our builders, and we had great coffee, and it was a fantastic venue in central London, and you could come and hang out all day, and you could bring the wife and the kids, and there was this whole kind of barbershop thing going when everyone was getting funky haircuts, and you could have tattoo people there, you could have artists doing live art, put photography on the walls, and make it something a little bit more upmarket and interesting and cool and artisan and creative. And so we were drinking in the pub, again a couple of weeks later, and Vicky and I just booked a venue. So we said, well, we've booked a venue, we're doing it. So that was at the end, actually, it was the end of 2012 that we were banned in the NEC. And we booked a date for May 2013 to do our first show. And I just emailed everybody on the Facebook group that I was blogging about and said, if we did a show in London, would you come? And they all went, yep. So we ended up hiring a couple of arches in Shoreditch, in a place called Shoreditch Studios, about 5 or 6 arches down from the place we have now. And 3,000 people turned up. We had 77 bikes, and we had coffee and retail and a barbershop and live tattooing and art on the walls and photography. And it was epic. It was brilliant. And we carried on from there. I mean, it sort of became this, it was a hobby, and the show was a hobby, and it was a bunch of mates. There were kind of about 12 of us, and we'd all gather around our flat in North London on a Wednesday night, and Vicky would cook food for a whole bunch of blokes, and then we'd talk rubbish all night, drink beer, and plan shows. We did 2 shows in that year, and the second show, I think 5,000 people turned up. We had, a whole bunch more bikes. Brad Pitt came to the show, so we decided that we should ignore that and not talk about it, because that was the right thing to do. He was there as a biker. It just became a thing.
Can I ask you, did he come with minders, or did he just turn up?
He came with, I would say, an entourage of 2. So just a couple of people with him, and they were all very low key. So yeah, no minders.
I had a good story about Sebastian Vettel, actually, somebody I know who has done some stuff with him from a business perspective. Said he's very keen on vintage cars and bikes. I don't know if you've met him. I haven't had that pleasure, but apparently he's known just to turn up at vintage bike shows and vintage car shows, baseball cap, glasses, no minders, just arrives. And I think that's it. When someone's they've got that global personality and is that famous and they can still do that, that's a cool thing to be able to do.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, a lot of the people that we know through all of this, they are the kind of people that just turn up, especially to a bike venue. Because, there, the trump card is, what did you turn up on? Not who are you? People don't ask, what do you do? They ask, what do you ride? And that's what we like about bikes. And I think a lot of the people that come to the bike shed who maybe would be considered celebrities turn up because people just ask them whether their bike's fuel injection or carbs. They're not really interested in a selfie or what film they just did, which is quite nice. Yeah.
So sorry, I interrupted. So you're now a couple of years into doing the events, but you still not got the permanent location yet. The restaurant.
Yeah, I mean, it was still a hobby. So, me and Vicky had grown-up jobs in media, and quite cushy ones as well. We didn't have to work too hard, and we got well paid. But we realized we had a thing, and it was really pretty special. And also, suddenly, we were applying our skills, Vicky's experience and skills in events and media, and my sort of skills in branding and marketing and storytelling, into something we actually gave a shit about, which was quite nice. And it seems to be gathering momentum. All these other things were happening, like Dirkwake and the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride. And, brands like Triumph were suddenly building cafe racers that you buy. I mean, it was moving the entire industry in a particular direction that was finally interesting again. After 10 years of being a biker, not being bothered about what the manufacturers are doing and trying to find interesting older bikes and changing them through customization, all of a sudden it was actually interesting. So there was a kind of a zeitgeisty thing happening, and it seemed quite proper, quite deep. And there was Wheels and Waves, and it was definitely a global scene. And shows like the One Show and the Hand Built Show in the US, it all happened in about 2012. But it all happened at the same time. So there were a couple of people that came to our show, and both of them were kind of bike nuts. One of them was a guy called Nicholas Cowell, who's Simon Cowell's brother, but he's not much like Simon, loves his bikes, and he's effectively an estate agent with a bit of money. He's done well. Fantastic guy. And also a guy called Frederick Lukoff, who was actually the CEO of Stella McCartney, but a huge bike fan, got about 15 motorcycles, and his idea of a holiday is kind of, 5 weeks riding into the middle of nowhere on an inappropriate bike. And both of them individually came up and said, look, this is amazing. How can we help you? This should be a full-time thing. And also the sentiment for us was, after show 2, that we'd created effectively a pop-up club. And the idea had always been that if you own a motorcycle, you're in a club. And I'd been a member of Soho House for years, as had my wife, Vicky. And when that first started, it was all about being in media or television or film. Everyone was a cameraman or a director or a writer or a lighting guy. And I kind of thought, well, being in BikeShed, it's BikeShed Motorcycle Club. It's a club. So we modeled the show around a pop-up club with a lot of hospitality and good food, but non-exclusive. Anyone was welcome. And a lot of people were saying, well, why are you wrapping it up on a Monday? You know, this should be open every weekend. And of course, our challenge was, well, that's not going to work. You know, where's the money? Where's the money in winter? And where's the money on a Tuesday afternoon? You know, it's not going to happen. But Frederick and Nicholas said, look, if you want to investigate this, we'll help you with seed money to put together a business plan. And Nicholas had been looking at doing something with Charlie Borman the year before. And basically, he was going to open a proper private members club in a pub. And he said, well, what do you think of that? And I said, well, it's a great idea, but you know, once all your mates have turned up a few times, it's going to be empty. You know, they'll come to all your big parties, but it's not really a business, which we agreed on. But the more we kind of looked at it, the more we thought this really could be a thing. You know, you could have a really cool version of the Cafe Deus with maybe a smattering of Soho House in there. You know, just something really relevant and credible and authentic that was open to everybody, but also was about bikes, but for everyone, real common ground. Because that's what we found at our show. Half our visitors weren't bikers. They were people who liked photography, or, you know, and people did bring their other halves and they brought their kids. And I thought, well, that could be a really cool destination. I mean, in the way that the Hard Rock Cafe is about music, but you don't go there because you play the guitar. You go there because it's a cool vibe and it's an experience. It's very dated and it's the 1980s, but I thought, could we have that for real biking? And so we sort of put a business plan together, and then everybody wanted to be involved. People thought it was brilliant. We found a venue and we put in a cheeky pitch for planning permission, which it didn't have, to open a cafe bar restaurant with a, you know, retail attached to it and everything else. And we got planning permission, which was insane. We didn't expect that. It was a bit of a surprise. So suddenly we were in the middle of show 3, I think, and it was like, hey guys, we've got planning permission for that venue in Shoreditch. Oh shit, we better find some money. So we just used our network of friends and members, and we sort of crowdfunded it through people that we knew who had money, friends of Fred's and Frederick's and Nicholas's and ours. We literally tapped up our mates and said, have you got a few quid? Do you want to invest in something? And we ended up, over the period of about a year and a half of planning it and building it, with 40 investors, you know, including ourselves, who'd all put money in, or time, or skills, or some sort of useful something, and created this space. And it took a while to get it all up and running. We did another couple of shows in the background, and that grew because we'd grown into Tobacco Dock, and the show became sponsored and the brands were involved, and it became a proper interesting business, which helped us in terms of being a credible thing to invest in. And then we opened the BikeShed in November 2015 with the launch of Triumph's new range of liquid-cooled Bonnevilles, with the Thruxton and you know, the Street Twin and all those bikes, which was fantastic. I mean, for them, that was their launch event, which was brilliant marketing for us. And we haven't really looked back. It's just been one big sort of journey of growth and change and learning, you know, and from that first day, we've been busy and it's worked. I mean, we made a lot of mistakes and we had a lot of scary moments along the way. We ran out of money a few times. We certainly nearly lost it all on a few occasions, but, you know, through just hard work and bloody mindedness, we just kept on cracking on. And you know, COVID-19 notwithstanding, we're still here.
Yeah, and you were following the news on Facebook. Back in the start of the year, you were just about ready to open the new restaurant in the States.
Yeah. I mean, the LA project is still on. It's still building. Problem is we can't go to LA. We can't fly. So we were running a bit late anyway. It's really difficult getting planning permits and things in America. It's this big, giant machine of bureaucracy. And, you know, I guess they've sort of formalized bribery and turned it into permitting. Everything involves lawyers and expedited plan checker, whatever people. And so everything over there just takes forever. It took us a full 6 months after our planning had gone in to get a rubber stamp to say we would get our approval at some point.
Mm.
So the whole thing was late anyway. And actually, we were lucky we were late because we were due to open in March.
Right.
So if we'd opened in March this year, we'd have been screwed because we'd have had this big venue with all these staff and no customers.
Yeah.
It probably would have killed us, and no government furlough, no support, no nothing. So we were kind of lucky, really.
Yeah. And so the BikeShed in London, when do you expect it to be kind of taking customers back in? I mean, it's kind of a question everyone's asking about every social or gathering place there is, outside of the shops. I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head what the government said in terms of when pubs. Is it early July?
It's 4th of July, yeah.
4th of July.
Well, the problem is they haven't given anybody any guidelines yet. And these things take planning. And also, they still can't make up their mind about 1 meter or 2 meters. So you can't really operate a business in hospitality with the 2 meter rule because no one can work in the kitchen or behind the bar unless you've got the biggest kitchen in the world. I also don't quite know how a waitress can hand someone a plate of food. They haven't explained that.
No.
How do you do that? So there are a whole bunch of things that are just really obvious. If you sit on a table with somebody, but they have to be in your bubble. I mean, they literally haven't laid it out, and I know why they haven't laid it out, because they want to make it a 1 meter rule, and they want to make it easier, but they don't want to have everyone shouting at them. So they're leaving till the last minute, and they also want to see that there isn't another spike, which there will be anyway. But they want to see that Italy and France and Spain are still doing the same thing, so they can go, well, they did it. And so we anticipate they'll suddenly change the rules at the last minute. And if they drop to a 1 meter rule, we will open on the 4th of July.
Right.
And what we'll probably do is open for a few weekends only to see what happens, because we don't really know what consumer confidence will look like. Most of our trade within the bike world is at weekends. And I know that bikers are a hardy bunch, and they make up their own minds what they want to do. Government guidelines are exactly that, guidelines. My dad used to say, rules are for the guidance of a wise man and the obedience of a fool. So I think bikers think a bit like that. They'll turn up if they want to turn up. Our midweek trade, I mean, everyone's working from home in Shoreditch. All these kind of trendy hipster design agencies, they're all probably sitting at home. So we probably won't have huge daytime weekday trade. So we'll try a few weekends and see what that looks like, and take it from there.
Well, it's good to hear. I've been there many times. As I said, I interviewed Charlie there, which was a fantastic environment for doing that kind of thing. But I take, whether it's corporate clients I'm taking there, or friends, or just meeting friends on bikes for coffee, it's just the perfect place to go, and one of my favourite places in London, actually. So it's a great place.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and genuinely, it's it just has such great atmosphere, and find somewhere that's great for taking a corporate client to, but is also good to go with your biking mates. It's a rare place indeed. So the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, and I appreciate we're kind of slowly running out of time, but the BikeShed Community Response Group, which I had to kind of hold my hand up. I registered for it, well, it must be 3 or 4 weeks ago, when I was very quiet with work, and 2 days after I registered for it, I got busy with work. So I've not been able to, although I've registered for it, I've not been able to go out and do it. I went and got my vest and everything, so I'm a bit gutted about that. But I will do it. So yeah, the community response group, just talk us through what happened with that.
Well, I mean, it was kind of, Vicky was just saying, one of our guys said, oh, do you know anybody who lives up north? Because I'd love someone within our network, within our community, to just look on I can't remember if it was their dad or their mum or something. They said, do you know anyone up there who could look in my mum? And Vicky said, oh, we should get all our riders to do that. We've got this huge network of people who are part of our group, and who follow us on social media, or on a motorbike with nothing to do. And, we should get them mobilized. We should get them to do something. And, Vicky comes up with lots of good ideas, and some less good ideas, but sometimes they just ring true. And we all kind of looked at each other and went, that's really interesting. We should be doing something. All of us felt frustrated. All of us wanted to have some sort of purpose. everybody's being sort of locked down and under furlough. And there were lots of ways where you were allowed to go out and help people, and all these community groups popping up. And I thought, well, you know, there's a reason first responders use motorcycles. It's, you know, they can get to places quickly. You know, they park right by the person that needs help. And I just started a Facebook page. I literally walked away from that conversation and started a Facebook page and thought, what should I call it? BikeShed community support, response, whatever, volunteer. I didn't even know what we were calling it. Created a Facebook page and shared that. And then within a couple of days, 800 people had signed up and said, well, great, I'm here. What do I do? And I was like, oh, shit. So one of our members, a guy called Mike Butler, who's been a BikeShed member for a really long time. So I've been working with this consultancy company called Wavestone, and they do kind of digital realization. They make things happen, and maybe they could help you with a digital solution to getting these riders out and about. What do you think you need? And I had a chat with them, and I said, well, we kind of need Uber for bike couriers. And they, well, lots of companies do logistics. That's exactly what they do. So they went and investigated about 5 or 6 different companies for free, and spoke to them and said, would you consider doing this for free? And, you know, give us access to your platform without a charge. And they found this company, Gopher, that said, brilliant, we love that. We'll let you do that. And then they helped us through the process of making it work for a volunteer organization, because although it sounds simple, these things are not made for this in any way, shape or form. The volunteers don't behave the same way as couriers. They're not sitting by the roadside twitching for a job. As I used to when I was 4'7" as a courier in London in the 80s. You know, you're sitting in a cave somewhere, you know, in a basement in Vauxhall waiting for your next job. It doesn't work like that. People are sitting around on a Saturday negotiating with their other half about what they're going to do on Sunday afternoon. So it works in a different way, and it's made to make money, and it's all about rating. And we really had to undo a lot of their stuff to make it work, and it was quite painful. But all credit to Gopher. You know, they ended up making something that was supposed to be very digital. It was a very analog process and quite sort of human, quite heavy on admin. But it works, and we ended up with 1,200 registered couriers across the UK, despite the fact that it was really difficult to register, and we needed a huge comprehensive guide of don't do this and don't do that. And of course, a lot of people, you know, in certain regions we're really busy, and certain regions there's almost nothing. And we weren't responsible for finding the work; we were responsible for doing the jobs. So you know, we couldn't focus on organizing the riders at the same time as going out and saying, hey, who needs help? So a lot of people came to us. So we're a little bit weirdly regional. So we do really well in the West Country and around London and the home counties and Manchester and Liverpool, and then right the way up through to Scotland. But we're really quiet in Norfolk, and we're really quiet in Wales. And it's quite a mixed bag. And in London, we've got so many riders, quite hard to get a job. So if I was guessing, I'd say out of our 1,200 riders, there are probably 400 people that do all the work. And there are some people that do jobs every single day and do 3 or 4 jobs a day. And there are some people that have never done a job. So it's quite weird. There are a lot of people that have never done a job. But I think, you know, somebody had a good quote, actually. They said, you know, you're still a hero if you're standing ready. I quite like that. But of course, now what's happening is a lot are going back to work. So there's less availability. But the need for PPE is still there. We got involved in a lot of other projects as well. We did this oximeter response where people who are in danger of dying of silent hypoxia, they go to sleep and never wake up because they don't realize their oxygen sats are low. Delivering probes to them so they can take an NHS 111 call and read off the sats on their in their blood. And we did that with this doctor who was part of the NHS 111 response. So it's proper clinician referral. And also now we're delivering COVID-19 test kits to doctors before they go to work. So if they're on shift tomorrow, we'll send them a COVID-19 or take them a test kit today. We wait while they take a swab, and then we take it to the lab at the hospital, and they get it tested, and they get told whether or not to come into work or not. And food deliveries and pharmaceuticals and prescriptions. So some of it's proper good life-saving stuff. And we've definitely had feedback from doctors and patients who said, you know, your oxygen probe saved my life. I was told to stay at home, and my oxygen sats were 85%, and I got rushed into hospital and spent 2 weeks there on a respirator, thanks to delivering me an oxygen probe. So that's been really cool. I don't really know what we're going to do with it as time goes on, because we're running out of riders. And it's not just a question of more people joining, it's about availability. So we're going to have to kind of work it out. But it's been amazing. And I think it showed the strength of the biking community. It was really nice for us to remind people that we're community first and brand second. We are about people and riding bikes. I mean, everything we do is an excuse to get on 2 wheels. And the hard part is making a business out of it. So we remind ourselves we're supposed to make enough money to live. But really what we're about is getting people together to do good stuff. And, motorcycle riders are the noblest of people. They really are. They're people that like to stand out from the crowd. They're the people most likely to stop over and, stop and pull over if you're broken down by the side of the road and help you out. So I really I've been really pleased to see that be a thing. And it's kept us relevant, I suppose, while we couldn't trade, which is a nice bonus. So yeah, it's been a fantastic experience, but bloody hard work, really, really hard work. It's 7 days a week running a disorganized courier firm of volunteers, and tracking lost packages and people that don't label things properly and stuff that goes to the wrong place. And it's been entertaining.
Yeah, as I've been following the messages on Facebook, of course, I'm sure I've only seen a tiny proportion of them, but I did think there must be a huge amount of work going on behind the scenes. So I think credit where credit's due to you and Vicky and to everybody who was involved in it. Go for it. Everybody put their time in for free, as well as obviously all the riders who are doing it. I think it's been a really, really great thing to have done. It's just a shame I've not managed to get out and do one yet, but I'm sure I will at some point over the next couple of weeks. I'll find a spare day somewhere.
Yeah.
But I appreciate I've kind of gone a few minutes over what I said I would, but that's been really, really fascinating. Best of luck with opening the BikeShed again and with LA. But I think for now, that was all the kind of things that I wanted to talk about. Unless there's anything else you wanted to kind of talk about in terms of when the viewers of Venture Bike TV get to see this. Is there anything else you wanted to say about either the London or the LA location?
There's nothing in particular, really. I mean, I think, the main thing, if I was going to ask anything of people, I just hope people that remember what an amazing community bikers are. We're going to come out of lockdown into really weird times. Everything's very disconnected at the moment, and there's really weird behaviour out there. I think people have been a little bit kind of dazed by all of this kind of stuff and not seeing people and all the rest of it. And I hope people will kind of come together and remember what unites us, and remember how brilliant it is to be in an amazing community, and come to the BikeShed and go to other venues, and and make sure people can remember what unites us rather than what divides us.
Yeah, absolutely. Good words to finish on. Thank you very much.